Hi, I'm Christy Summerton. I'm a co-founder of the Creation Care Hub in Wylam, Scotland, part of the Wylam Paisley team. Today, I'm going to be bringing a message about the impact our consumption is having on God's creation and God's heart for his creation. If you haven't looked at the news lately, here's a little catch up for you. There's a plastic crisis, a climate crisis, there's endangered species, some of them on the brink of extinction, pandemics, murmurings of food shortages, of war, of energy crises, cost of living crises. And it's pretty overwhelming if you really sit in it. And this impacts generations, it impacts beyond borders, beyond class, and a lot of it is invisible. It can be difficult to see the impacts that our everyday decisions are having on our neighbors around the world. And some people sound pretty angry, maybe rightly so. People are afraid. Some people are in denial. But what's a person to do? I remember in 2018, I happened to sit down and catch a documentary on the problem of plastic here in the UK. And I was pretty afraid and overwhelmed after watching that. And I had quite a big wake-up call. I had thought that I was someone who was caring for the planet. I thought that I was doing really well by recycling, and I had no idea what a major problem plastic was that went so deep and so wide. I hadn't realized that my plastic that I buy from the shop can end up across the world in the ocean. That can have an effect on the ecosystems there, and then that God's created, which then has an impact on the people that God created. And I know I'm not the only one, because I thought, wow, if I thought I was doing really well, how many other people are there out there like me who think that they're doing well, but really we have no idea that this is happening. We have been made in God's image, and we've been given authority to rule and reign over everything that God has created. In Genesis 1:26-28, I'm sure you've either seen that referenced in the articles, or it comes up a lot in creation care. God gave us the responsibility and pleasure to look after what he's made, to care for it, to see it flourish, and to do what's best for it. Like it says in Psalm 72 of what a good ruler is, one who serves to the flourishing of what's around them. And this word rada, to rule, has been interpreted differently over the years, especially in Christianity. But if you look back to the Old Testament and throughout the Bible, like I just mentioned in Psalm 72, that a good ruler is the one who serves to flourish, to the flourishing of what's around them. But there's also a reference in Ezekiel with that word in it, rada, which is speaking about the shepherds of Israel, and it talks about and refers to an ungodly ruler who only uses what they've been given to rule over for their own benefit, with disregard for the well-being of others and creation. To be self-focused and to only look at yourself at the expense of creation, not serving what they've been given to rule over. So it's to its detriment, not to its flourishing. And that's what God says is not a good example of a good ruler. These are our times. These are our dilemmas of this day. We've tried fast, we've tried easy, we've tried efficient and cheap, and that has brought about some miraculous things, especially in the medical world. But it's also brought trauma in our riverways and oceans, on our health from undernutritious food, decimation of land, overuse of fossil fuels causing climate pollution. God created the world to flourish, and he left that responsibility with us. And we thought that we could just do what we like because we're ruling and reigning over creation. But that's not what God intended. That wasn't the definition. Dominion doesn't mean to dominate. It means to serve. In Acts 1, Jesus told us to bring the gospel to Judea, Samaria, to the ends of the earth. The fullness of that gospel includes caring for all of creation, meaning people and the rest of what God made. Our choices of what we consume every day is having an impact on all of creation. What we think is a solo venture is not. We're a body. When we put something into the recycling or the bin and think that's it, or maybe we don't think at all, we need to be thinking about who made this product, which is in my hands. How much were they paid? How did it get here? Where will the packaging go? And when and how will it break down and go back to creation it came from, or will it? Until the Industrial Revolution, which happened in the mid 1700s to mid 1800s, the natural systems that God created were able to cope with what we as humans were doing. But since then, by pumping extra carbon from oil and natural gas, otherwise known as methane, and also reducing the natural systems that are there by overlogging, changing ecosystems of multiple plants and trees and insects and animals down to one type of tree or plant called a monoculture. We're reducing God's natural intentional design systems, also known as biodiversity, in pursuit of wealth. A lot of times in pursuit of wealth or power. As humans, as God's creation, we have so much potential to care for what God's made. But we can also have a lot of excuses. We don't have enough money. We don't have the time. It's not my responsibility. But the thing is, there is no way. We only have one planet, and we do have the responsibility. God's given it to us. And there's a lot of humanistic advice on how to deal with these crises. And as the body of Christ, we can have something to say on this. We have something to say on this. That God cares about what he's created. And he's asked us to care for it as well. There's a really great scientist, Dr. Catherine Hayhoe, and she explains the different mentalities that we as humans can have. One of them, and there's different shapes that go with them, and I find it really helpful as a visual artist to have these. So one of them is egocentric. That would be shaped like a triangle. So maybe how we've misinterpreted rule, humans would be on top, and we would do what we like with the rest of creation. And then there's ecocentric. That looks more like a circle, and humans would be somewhere in the middle. We would just be like all the other animals. There's no difference between us and the other animals. But as Christians, we know that that's not the case. We know that we've been given a special place. And so a theocentric view on creation would be in the shape of a heart, where humans are at the bottom and we've been given a special responsibility to care for the rest of creation. I'm a visual artist, and if we think about God, well, we don't have to think about him. He's the great creator. He is the original artist. And what he's made is his masterpiece. But if we were to think of an artist who's put their heart into their piece of work, into a painting, I studied ceramics, so into my pieces of pottery, I would be pretty devastated if someone came along and they just either slashed through my paintings or broke all the bits of pottery that I had put so much of myself into. And if we think about creation like that, if we think about the environment around us and all the things that God's made and our choices and the impact that they're having, are we looking after what God's made well? Are we allowing it to flourish, or are we destroying it? And that was my revelation through this plastic documentary. And I realized, wow, there's a lot going on out there that maybe we're just not aware of, and we need to start helping people become more aware so that we can actually do something about it. And sometimes it takes some sacrifice. We have had to look at the things that we consume and how much we consume, and all the things that I talked about earlier about where things go and who has made them and what will happen to it when I'm finished with this. And sometimes those choices can be costly. It can be more expensive to look at products that are more eco-friendly, or it's going to cost me in my time to walk to work instead of driving. But I believe that God will honor those choices, that when you make those choices to honor Him and what He's made, that He will honor those and He will provide. He is our great provider. He is the one who can do it all. And I believe that this is no longer an option or an extra. We need to be really looking at this in our ministries, in our locations or YWAM locations, and we can't just always do what is the most cheap or what's the least expensive. We need to be looking at the other impacts that our consumption is having, looking at how we can reduce our impact on emissions. And there's a lot happening in governments at the moment to help with these things. And so if you're looking at some of these alternatives for renewable energy, now is the time to do this. In Revelation 21:1, it talks about a new heaven and a new earth. A lot of times people will say, oh, they'll make an excuse of, oh, well, it's all going to burn anyway. But in Revelation 21:1, that word for new is actually a Greek word called kainos, which actually means renewed, like a refiner's fire. So it's not an all-consuming fire. An all-consuming fire does what it says. It consumes everything. But a refiner's fire, it only burns the impurities. So when we say, oh, well, it's all going to burn anyway, well, actually, in the end, God's going to renew heaven and renew earth. We're going to be in a renewed heaven and renewed earth, just like we're renewed when we come to know Jesus, that Jesus renews us. He doesn't make us a totally different person, but we're a renewed person. And I guess I bring that up just to eliminate any excuses that we might have, and to bring about a full gospel. Like I said earlier, in Acts 1, Jesus told us to bring the gospel to Judea, to Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. The fullness of that gospel includes caring for all of creation, so that we can be good stewards of what He's given us, so that we can see things flourish, see people flourish, see places flourish, see all the beauty and the biodiversity that God's made flourish, because that brings him glory. It's our choices can bring him glory when we choose to do what's best and what's right for all of creation, to love our neighbors around the world well, to think through our actions and not just consume mindlessly. So we have our own personal responsibility, but then we can also be praying for our leaders in our YWAM locations and also the leaders of your countries that you're in or the countries that you come from as they make decisions which affect how we're caring for God's creation. And I hope that you receive this message as a way of calling out love, for us to come higher into God's ways, that there's hope in the midst of these crises. And if we do what we can, glorifying God in our decisions, turning from where we've missed the mark, God will meet us in that place, like in the story of the prodigal son. The father runs to meet his lost son, and we will not come away lacking. I pray God's peace and his blessing upon you in your decision making. Thank you so much.